Evening, coaches. Welcome to the Locker Room Podcast, Daily Sports Science. Ryan Jones back again tonight. Ryan, great to have you back on, and our regular contributor, Daniel St. Ledger. Lads, we were at a few games over the weekend. I think we've travelled the length and breadth of the country. We've watched a couple of games. Ryan, you've been to a few. Daniel, myself, and yourself were together as well yesterday in the athletic grounds. Great occasion, brilliant attendance, great atmosphere. Ryan, probably the game of the weekend, Dublin Kerry. Two teams that are very, very much in sync with each other. A lot of rivalry, huge history, huge tradition. You were there Saturday night, Ryan?
I was, Stephen, yeah. Was really looking forward to the match. I suppose Dublin, you probably felt needed the points, considering where they were at in the league. And then Kerry, after the All-Ireland final last year, you would have thought they wanted to come out and, I suppose, impose themselves as well. To be honest, Dublin just came out of the blocks and Kerry couldn't deal with them. I think someone told me Dublin scored 2-9 out of their first 12 shots. It was phenomenal the way they could, I suppose, beat their men, get into scoring zones. Conor O'Callaghan was unmarkable. But the big thing for me was that Dublin were very aggressive on the Kerry kick out. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about Shane Ryan, and whenever Kerry come under pressure and he needs to get a kick out away, that there's some people would say there's nobody better at it. Well, what Dublin did, and we've talked about, other teams trying this, he just went three banks of four, regardless of how many Kerry players were in their own defence. So Dublin set up four in the full forward line, four around the 45, and four in midfield, every single kick out. And at the start, Kerry couldn't deal with it because what they were doing was they only had maybe 5 or 6 defenders inside their own 45. So the short kick out wasn't on. And then they were driving it along, and Fenton was mopping up a lot of the ball. Once or twice it did happen to come off where it went out over the whole lot, and Kerry probably could have gone in for a goal or two. But in the finish, Kerry realised that the tactic that Dublin were setting up was killing them. So what they actually ended up doing was they had to react, and they put about 8 or 9 players. They just matched the numbers. So normally you would see whoever's hitting the kick out there in control of the way they want to set up. It was actually the other way around. Because Dublin set up 3 banks of 4, after about the 5th or 6th kick out, then Kerry just said, you know what, just match them. So if Dublin put 8 squeezed in, we're just going to send 8 of our defenders and maybe join up with 2 half forwards to equal the numbers, is what I'm saying. Yeah. And that was one thing I just thought Dublin were really trying out, was that high aggressive press. Yeah. And that probably set the tone for the first 15, 20 minutes of that game.
Mm-hmm. And Dublin do have, Ryan, like the fantastic athleticism and physicality. And that probably, it does, Ledge. Me and you talked about this yesterday. When you press high on a kick out, like, and you win one, it gives you energy, Ryan, doesn't it? Like, it obviously gave Dublin real energy, like, early in that game.
Well, Stephen, I suppose there was a couple of years ago whenever they played Mayo. I'm not too sure what stage, was it, an All-Ireland quarter-final or semi-final, and Mayo had Dublin rattled in the first half. And if you remember correctly, Dublin just went ultra aggressive with the squeeze.
Yeah.
And the first 10 minutes of that second half, more or less, they blew Mayo out of it, and then that was the game won. It was the exact same the other night. And as you said, you got to be brave, and obviously it takes a lot of work on the training ground, but it was something that was really obvious. And Shane Ryan had no other option but to just bomb it long. And like, we all know how good he is at getting it away short. And as you said, Fenton out around the middle there. Yeah. I suppose Kerry haven't had David Moore now. Jack Barry is also a big loss. So Fenton had it all his own way, especially initially in the start, the first 20, 25 minutes of that game.
Yeah, and Ledge sort of trialled Conor O'Callaghan in around the middle of the field there this year, but King Kong was back to his best the other night,
Yeah, I think he had the number in his back, but I think he drifted in fairly quick. I tell you, it's really interesting. Ryan was talking about the Dublin kick-out, and the kick-out, I know some people kind of might think we go on a bit, live an awful lot about kick-outs, but kick-outs create the environment for other things to happen. So, like, you look at Kerry pressed every Dublin kick-out as well. Pressed it poorly, though. They went with a man-to-man kind of a half-arse press, we call it, and like I'd say, David O'Hanlon never had a handier night in goals. Dublin went into a bunch and break, and all O'Hanlon had to do was one step chip at either side. Yeah. And because Dublin were getting such a platform from their own kick-out, Kerry couldn't get into any kind of an environment to defend. They only got it once, I think, in the first half, where maybe Paddy, Clifford got around John Small, and they should have had a goal from it. That was the only chance they ever really threatened the kick-out. And like you look at that on the other foot, you look at Dublin, who were, as Ryan said, like hyper aggressive. You could see from the behind the goal shot, it was like each line of 4 had a rope tied to their hips. I was saying this to you yesterday. It was like that a big elastic band. And when Shane Ryan moved his body to the left to shape the kick out to his right hand side, they all shifted with it. And then when he moved the other way, they all shifted back. And if nothing else, it's a visual illusion. So as Ryan said, like Kerry probably didn't have enough players into it, but it makes a keeper think, Jesus Christ, where is there to go here? Because all they're seeing is this 4 lines of blue players, 3 lines of blue players swaying right and left, and it's really hard to pick something out. But that created the environment for Dublin to play with a real edge and a real intensity. Whereas on the other foot, I think Kerry's pressing tactic was the man-to-man idea. They never got the environment to really put Dublin under pressure. And I think that was one of the most interesting things. Like, you've got 2 teams both pressing kickouts. But this is where the coaching nuances come into a little bit. Like, for me, only one type of kick-out press works really, and that's when you have that zone set up. Like, I mean, it's very hard to go man-to-man. And especially, like, if Clifford, let's say David Clifford has one weakness, like, I know I'd say Cluxton would be targeting him in the Ireland final to get Merchant on ball and get him out, because let's call a spade a spade. I don't think he particularly likes going backwards. So Kerry need his own, and I thought it was funny that they went with a man-to-man press, because like they're probably like, you remember 2016 when they went after Cluxton hard before half time, they got the 2 goals. Like, they're one of the earliest proponents of a proper zonal press. So look, maybe a bit of shadow boxing, I don't know, but I thought it was really interesting. Both teams pressing kickouts, but both doing it to varying different degrees, you know.
I think it's fantastic, lads. We're talking about it because, Les, we're going to talk about Donegal Armagh very soon. And me and you came away yesterday. The takeaways we had yesterday from that game were more or less Sean Patton and Blaine Hughes. But we'll come back to that. But Ryan, going back to Dublin, I remember my first experience at Dublin in 2017 with Carlo. Obviously, we heard this 44. We didn't know what it was. We worked out pretty quickly straight away that it was the banks of 4, and the press was just unbelievable. Now, we were probably maybe a kick out or 2, Ryan, away from maybe getting a goal chance, Ledge, just a wee flick of the ball or a break of the ball. But it's the risk and reward, Ryan, that they really put into this, And one thing I'll say to you is this: I would probably look at Dublin, and I'm thinking at the way they press teams and the aggression Daniel talked about. Like, it's just the aggression of that press. Niall Morgan, for example, I'll give you an example. Like, me and Niall will play a bit of golf now and again, and he said in 2018 I think it was the semi-final, 2018, the final. Do you remember Tyrone went 5-1 up, Brian, after about 10 minutes, and they were cruising and they were going really well, and wee Bradley was causing havoc inside, Cian O'Sullivan off on a hamstring injury, and Dublin were in a bit of trouble. And then all of a sudden, he said, after about 12 or 13 minutes, Dublin worked out what they were going to do. So Tyrone's 2 kick-out strategies that year were get it away within 10 seconds or hit Colin Cabna. He says, the Dubs had us worked out within about 10 minutes what we're doing. So what they done, Ryan, he says, like, and then Morgan's an incompetent keeper, one of the best in Ireland. He says, I set the ball up, Stevie, and I'm looking at the field, and all I can see is just a fucking sea of blue. And they're moving, and the hands are up, and the intensity and the body language of the press, Ryan, is so important. It's okay throwing those bodies forward, like, but as Daniel says, there has to be a real energy and intent about it. Would you agree? Like,
yeah, that's it. They back themselves. They've total faith. You see some teams that set up 3 groups of 4, as you said, but they're nearly afraid of actually going for it because of what's going to possibly happen out over the whole lot. When Dublin set that up, they're convinced they're going to win the ball, and they just, as you said, they just go at the opposition then from there. The other thing there was 3 or 4 maybe free Kerry players in and around Fenton or even beyond him into the Kerry forward line, and he wasn't, or none of that bank of 4 was concerned at all. This is what they were doing. Don't get me wrong, once or twice it did go wrong in that the ball happened to break and Kerry were away, and they could have had maybe another day. They could have had a couple of goals, but that was the big thing for me. The other thing you mentioned there was Merchant. Merchant picked up Clifford, and there was numerous times, we all know about Merchant bombing forward, and he's deadly at it. But the only thing I noticed from the sideline was that every single time Merchant went beyond the 45, so his defensive 45, if Clifford didn't track, they were shouting at Merchant to go back.
Yeah.
Every other Dublin player could do what they want. They could tramp up the pitch as often as they wanted, but he was the one guy that they were constantly telling stay back on him. So I think that was probably something that they were trying, for maybe later on, because we do know, as I said, Merchant's strengths going forward. Overall, I actually thought Merchant done decent on Clifford. Of course, Clifford's going to have a few moments, but that'll be interesting to see now if they meet each other down the line in a big game. Will they go with Fitzsimons again, or will Merchant be given that role? The other thing what impressed me about Dublin is, Stephen, we talk about coaches working a lot on sending big midfielders inside or sending maybe a big half forward inside on a mismatch. And a lot of the time, you don't see the high ball going in unless there is that so-called mismatch. With Dublin, they have obviously worked so much in the training ground with Con, Paddy Small, Kieran Kilkenny. They're not the tallest guys, but their ability not to win the ball above their head, it's their ability to pin their opponent back with their body. And Dublin aren't afraid. Like, they play great football and they come off the wings and great angles running.
Yeah.
But they're not afraid. They're not afraid to launch the ball in on the boys in the full forward line and back their strength.
It's having that variety in their game, Ryan. It's
having that variety.
Yeah,
and it also means then that Kerry were reluctant to come pressing out because they knew one long ball in over the whole lot to Con. And if he got, I suppose, in front of his defender and used his body, that's where the penalty came from. And at the end of the day, it might look like a soft penalty, but if the right ball is delivered in and the defender is pulling out of the forward, if it's inside the box, it's still a penalty. So that was something that they weren't afraid to mix their play, as you said.
Yeah. And here, Tanya, like, come back to what Ryan's saying there, you know, the ability to sort of have a plan B as such. My worry for Kerry is very straightforward. And I said this, actually, I was chatting to Benny Kohler today about this, like, and I was saying, if you take the two Cliffords out, and I've said this for a long time, Daniel, if you take the two Cliffords out, Kerry all of a sudden become very, very ordinary. Like, I just think Dublin have a wee bit more flexibility and a wee bit more variation in their game, you know.
Yeah, I think so. And you were mentioning Mershon, and I thought it was an unusual matchup on Clifford, given that there's about a 2 foot height difference. But you know what? It actually kind of, I think it spooked Kerry a bit because they obviously very early, like very quickly identified Clifford's on a mismatch here, and they started kind of launching 60, 70 meter ball in front of Clifford, even though there wasn't necessarily like a whole lot of numbers. It was 50-50 stuff where I still think Clifford's better on the floor. Like, I mean, yes, he's a big man, obviously, and he's a good pair of hands, but if he has space in front of him, put it in front of him. Don't try and skip a whole line. I think Kerry are best when they're playing through the lines with little 20, 30-yard kick passes. It's much harder to defend, where sometimes I thought Kerry were launching direct ball, skipping their half forward line, and Clifford was isolated. Like, look, in saying that, he still probably he could have had 3 goals easily at the same time. But I thought Merchant did quite well. But Dublin started the difference with Kerry and Dublin. I thought Dublin's variety, as you said, like sometimes there was little inlet passes coming in. Sometimes Con was going for a little backdoor cut. Sometimes he was drifting to the back post to look for a diagonal long ball in. As you said, that variety I think was really, really nice in Dublin's play. And I think Paddy Small probably had one of his better games for a while. I think he was really good. But ultimately, Con is the orchestrator of all of that. And what you had at the weekend was a pissed off Con O'Callaghan that's sick of listening to David Clifford being the best footballer in the country and the best that ever was. He played with a real little bit of edge that I probably haven't seen in Con in a long time. And ultimately what you had was 2 of the best, as far as I'm concerned, 2 of the best forwards in the country going hammer and tongs. And I thought Con came out the better of it. Like, but another day Clifford could have easily had 3-3, 3-4. But I suppose from Dublin's concern, I guess, that the majority of good things that came were coming through Con. You know what I mean? Ultimately, he was the linchpin. And we talked about him, big players. If Con goes for Dublin, I think they're a different team.
Yeah. Ryan, just what Daniel's saying there is very interesting, because I had a conversation today with a colleague in school, and we're chatting about Con and Clifford, you know, and he was sort of saying that Clifford, he's great to watch, kicks points, fantastic. He says, but it's an interesting one. He made it very, very straightforward. He says, like, Con gets me on the edge of my seat. He makes me sort of, you know, what's going to happen next? And you know, that sort of plant and drive, you know, that I think, Ryan, you sort of mentioned to me off air as well, his ability to find space, you know, he's a phenomenal forward. Like, he's probably one of the best forwards in the country by a mile. Like, you know, he's something else. And I just think, go on there, shout.
Well, what I would say is I feel Clifford, there's no difference really between the two of them. Clifford's skills are unbelievable, but Con's ability to accelerate, deaccelerate, step, use his body.
Tell me this, Ryan. Is it a wee bit like the sort of the Messi Ronaldo debate? You know, Clifford's got that sort of silkiness about him, but Con's got that dynamic power and ability to just change a game out of nothing. Like, you know.
Yeah. Con's his figures in the gym must be unbelievable. He's so powerful. You know, the way he can step his opponent. I mentioned there already, he can, you know, show one way and then all of a sudden plant and go cut the other way.
Yeah.
You mentioned there, Stephen, to me, or we were on about the two Cliffords and probably Sean O'Shea. If you can really, I suppose, do a job on them 3 to an extent. You know, we mentioned this last week. Are Kerry the same force? They're definitely not. And I was just looking at their line out the other night. Sean O'Shea, Paddy Clifford, and David Clifford stayed on the pitch. Their other 3 forwards were all taken off. They were, I think it's Declan Guinness at number 11, Burke at wing half forward, and Dara Moynihan. So I still feel Jack O'Connor still doesn't know what his best six forwards are. And, you know, them three boys that we mentioned are obviously always going to play every single minute, but he's still trying to find who to mix in with them. And I think that's the major thing has Kerry got the depth that maybe Dublin have? You know, Bulger the other night was excellent. Kilkenny, 0-4. Ross McGarry got through a mountain of work. Like, he gets on the ball, makes it happen. You know, you've Paddy Small. Obviously, you've Con. Like, they maybe have more all-round better forwards would be my thought on it.
Yeah. Ledge?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's more dynamism about them. That'd be the word I'd use for the Dublin forwards. And like, they have their hit and miss moments as well, but they're more dynamic, I think. I mean, as you say, like, wing forwards chipping in with a couple of scores, I think is always a massive thing for a forward line, that you're not totally dependent on an inside forward to get 90% of your scores. And as I said, Kilkenny, Ross McGarry chipping in with a couple here and there. Like, I thought Sean Bugler I think he is top class, to be fair to him. Especially on the counter attack, he's always coming up with a couple of scores and getting through a mountain of work as well. I think that's a huge fill up. I wouldn't be writing Kerry off or anything like that too early.
I don't think anybody is, Daniel. I don't think they are, but at the same time, you know, Dublin were wild impressive the other night. Wild impressive.
It was the best. Put it this way: the first 20 minutes was the best I've seen Dublin. And you know, we probably are hypercritical, but we'd analysed Dublin an awful lot, and every little thing they're doing the team 5-6 years ago. I thought they were top end for 20 minutes at the start of that game.
One thing, Ryan, I said last week, I don't know if you picked up this the other night. I said last week, I thought in front of goal, their unselfishness is unbelievable in front of goal. Like, they're always going to give it to the player in a better position. Like, always, like, you know, it's really unselfish stuff, like, you know.
And the other thing is, Stephen, they have a killer instinct. You know, if there's any sniff of a goal at all, they're going for it. Like, even that first goal where Con stepped inside and stuck it in top corner, most players will step inside and fist that ball over the bar. What I also noticed was a lot of them, they're given a license to take shots off. Sometimes you'd be saying, like, certain coaches be telling you work the ball to the perfect score. Like, Kieran Kilkenny the other night was taking shots with his left foot. They'd probably be saying that's his weak foot, he shouldn't be shooting from there. Fenton took one near the very end from maybe near 45 yards out, left foot sailed over the bar. So you wonder, what does Desi Farrell and his coaches be saying to these lads in training? You know, are they allowed to go and express themselves? Are they allowed to go for those shots if they back their own ability? Like, another day you'd be saying, if that didn't go over the bar, Kilkenny, why are you shooting from there on your weak foot? So they're given a license to, I suppose, express themselves.
That's an interesting one, right? Like, if you're let's say, I know Sean Lowry from Vincent's played a little bit last week. He probably doesn't have that license to shoot from anywhere. But when you're Con or Fenton or Kilkenny, I think you have enough credit in the bank that you can pull the trigger there whenever you feel like it. They trust the decision making, like, and I think so much good stuff goes through those lads' hands. Like, they're creative, but they can finish on top of that as well. Like, Fenton's chipping in with a couple of scores every single week without fail. Like, I mean, similar to Conor Glass, I think the two of them are kind of that same ilk of midfielder, you know.
So I suppose, Dan, that's just from a player's improvement of skill point of view, and also coaching. Probably if you're on a Dublin squad and you're just in, you're probably not going to use your weak foot in training to take that shot off. But if you're a Brian Fenton or a Kieran Kilkenny or a Con, they know they're going to start every game. So what I'm saying is, them boys are probably trying these things in training. The next step then is they'll try them in the National League, and I suppose you increase the intensity of the competition as they go along. So that's what I felt was the ability of them players there to showcase their skills, their weaker foot, back themselves was the standout from them and maybe the lesser teams.
One of the big things, Ryan, too, as well, like, when you're looking at Dublin, and Les, we've analysed the backdoor cuts, we've looked at Dublin's offensive patterns. You know, this was long before, obviously, aka Rory Gallagher, Derry came into the scene. You know, Derry have probably brought the offensive shape to a different level, and, you know, you're seeing elements now of teams trying to play in a third of the pitch and probe and overload one side, etc. There's so many different variations coaching wise, like, but Dublin were the originators of the backdoor cut. But one of the reasons why they were so unpredictable, in my opinion, and I want Daniel, I want yourself and Ryan's opinion on this. The likes of Kieran Kilkenny be driving down under the Hogan stand, right? Driving down under the Hogan stand, heading towards the hill. And he's got Con O'Callaghan or Dean Rock cutting off the Hogan stand. And he's playing a pass with the inside of it, an inside pass with his left hand. whereas most Gaelic footballers are maybe only one-handed or one-footed, you know, and that gives a team such a distinct advantage. Like, you know, when you've got the ability to play off both feet, what Ryan talked about there is so crucially important. Like, I actually think, lads, you get to a stage where you're too old to be coached that. You know, like once you miss that window at underage level, if you miss that window of opportunity to work on your less predominant side, like there's no point in working if you're 24. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, you get it at a certain window and that's it. Like, but surely, lads, like that's a massive advantage when you've got those skill sets, like massive advantage.
Yeah. And I don't think it's any secret that most of Dublin sessions would have about half an hour of really basic, simple skills integrated into them. I know talking to some of the Sylvester's lads that would be there, there is a massive emphasis on the simple skills. And look, as you go to a junior club and the manager might be doing simple hand pass and picking up a kick pass, and they might be saying, Jesus Christ, what are we paying someone for? But it's a different story when you're set up like that. You know, there's a real value put on, as you say, a left-handed hand pass to the stomach. There's a value on that. There's a value on a proper pickup. And when they're doing those things at tempo, as Ryan said, when you're lifting the intensity, and obviously their training is at another level altogether. Those simple skills. How often do we see those simple skills be the things that let you down in an All-Ireland final? Like it's very rarely the tactics and all the rest of it will get you to a certain point. But how often is it a hand pass to the floor when you're through on one-on-one on goal and there's a man beside you? How often is it a kick pass that is, instead of one bouncing chest, it's up around someone's head and it gives the defender a chance? Those simple skills are really, really undervalued, probably. You know, I mean, there's a lot of sexiness in GA at the moment, like with various different things, but the value in simple skills is cruel. And probably, as you say, once you get to a certain stage, mid-20s, you might lose sight of that a small bit, but I think it's something that coaches should be emphasizing in their training sessions religiously, the value of simple things done really well, but done over and over and over again. So when you get to the point of a game, it's second nature, you know?
Yeah. Ryan?
Yeah, well, I feel it's like everything, you know, you'll see players working on them maybe before training.
Yeah.
You might see players trying them an odd time in training. But for me, them Dublin boys, then they're taking it to the next level. They're actually backing themselves in a National League game and they're saying, I'm going to go for it, you know? And that's how you develop it further and further. You know, there's probably a lot of teams that say, Jesus, no, this is too risky. I'm not going to take this shot. I'm going to try and work it back and we're going to try and, you know, get a better angle for ourselves. And the best way to improve is putting yourself in an environment where the stakes are higher. And that's what them Dublin players are doing. Kilkenny, Fenton, these boys are obviously trying all this stuff in training. Where's the stakes going to be higher than that? Playing a National League game against Kerry and Croke Park. What's the next step after that? Championship game in Leinster. And then they're all the time getting better. So skill set, you know, they've got all the power, all the pace, all the tactics, but the skill set of them Dublin players is as well outstanding.
Yeah, and let's, you know, we were at the game yesterday, Armagh Donegal, and it's a nice sort of lead into it because we watched the both warm-ups, and Armagh's warm-up was actually very interesting, Ryan. We sort of watched a warm-up where Armagh were trying to predominantly kick the ball edge, look for marks. There was a lot of that, you know, we could see very clearly they want to implement the aspects of their game that they want to play. It was a sort of a 2v2 with one man kicking the ball in, but at the far end edge, we watched a simple sort of three groups, sorry, with 4 or 5 at each end line. And it was a simple straight line hand passing drill. But as Daniel said to me, Ryan, I'd love to hear your input in this. Like, because Jim McGuinness is delivering it and not, you know, Joe Bloggs down the road, it's, you know, there's a buy-in, you know, and it's weird because you look at Donegal's warm-up, how simplistic it was, straight line drill, straight line drill, straight line drill. But is coaching about the message rather than the actual, you know, dynamics of the drill of the game? You know, I think that's a massive part of it, Ryan.
I think McGuinness probably likes to keep it simple but flat out. I have no doubt he does do. I've no doubt that he, you know, of course they work on other things in training, but I'm not too sure if the Donegal and Armagh, both brilliant teams, I'm not too sure if they're at the level. Now it's only a National League, if they're at the level of Dublin and the skill set of the Dublin players. Dublin scored 3-18, albeit it might be in Croke Park. The scoreline in that game yesterday, what was it?
1-9 to 0-12.
1-9 to 0-12, yeah. I actually watched the Dublin and the Kerry warm-up, and a lot of it was based on skills. It wasn't very intense. Now, they did do a bit of, you know, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, but a lot of it was based on shooting, passing, kicking 30 yards, then they'll stretch it out. they'll bring it back in, make it fist passing. So their big, I suppose, emphasis was definitely on skills in their warm up.
Yeah, lads, you love that. You know how simplistic it was, but like it's the man that's delivered it. You were sort of saying, like, you know, if what was it you said to me yesterday? If a boy from Derry comes down and puts on a wee northern accent, yeah, and a boy from Laois doing it's not the same feel. Like, it's true, like, isn't it? Like, you know,
it frightens the shite out of all us others.
sorry for using Laois as a conundrum there, but go on.
Well, it probably it opens up a broader point about GAA warm-ups in general, and the amount of time. Like I remember so many county games. Like even you might remember a couple of them. It was probably pre your era where we were looking for any excuse why we weren't winning games, and a lot of the time warm wasn't right. Warm wasn't good enough. Warm wasn't intense enough, and you could go out the following week and win and do the same warm when it's fine, you know. So look, it's interesting, but ultimately, as Ryan said, like you just want to get your skills moving because everyone will have a warm at a different intensity. Some lads are like some lads want to go flat out for 15 minutes before the game. Some lads are nice and chilled. It's less complexity is the better for me. Like as few cones as possible. Like you know, you'd like to see, but I do think the message is the key thing. Like there really is. Like I mean, when I remember telling you the story yesterday when Peter Canavan came down to us in 2012 and did a session with us in Carton House during the training weekend, and he just did a crisscross hand passing drill. But because Peter Canavan was doing it, it was the most intense 15 minutes we've ever done. And Luke Dempsey tried to do it the following week, and it was a waste of time. So like there's a huge amount of I know poor Luke, but sure he's only trying to do the same things, and we fleece him then for not doing complicated drills. But it's the same. It's the message. It's how you deliver the message and what buy-in you get. Like I'm convinced there is no black and white right way to play football. There's absolutely not. You do whatever suits your players, but as long as you have buy-in from your whatever 27, 28 players who are all willing to follow your system, whatever it is, I think that's the best plan ultimately, and I think the message is critical in that.
Well, sorry, Ryan.
I'd be one of those boys as well. You're always trying to get in early and see, Jesus, what's Donegal doing the warm up? What's Derry doing? We talked about it last week. Mark was saying a lot of their warm up was based on coming off wings. So I deliberately wanted to get in early. I was like, I wonder what Dublin and Kerry do, and I was actually shocked at how simple. Like it wasn't very taxing at all, but it was all the skills, and it was everything was covered: tackling, bit of kick passing, opening it out. Maybe then it was all fist passing. Then they bring it in closer and they just say it's only fist passing. Small sided games, but it was very simple, and it kind of made me think of if you go to a soccer match, a lot of the soccer warm ups are very much. It's just a bit of movement initially. They'll have a coach that'll be showing them different movement patterns. And then they just go into skills, first touch, maybe one touch, open it out, maybe then a bit of long range kick passing. And that's all it is.
Yeah. Ryan, I swear to God, lads, I swear to God, this is the conversation we had this morning in the PE staff room in school. Our GA warm-ups over-exaggerated, right? And my whole thing was about, even yesterday, I'm not getting a ticket anyway, but even yesterday, like, the synchronizing of the whistles, both groups stopping at the same time. It's all sort of regimented. And I think back to a couple of things, right? This is my take on it. I remember the Naughties going up the Leinster final every year. Myself and a good friend of mine, Kieran Condon, actually met him yesterday, led to the match. Unfortunately, I met him in the wee lad with the match, standing behind the goals. Big Armagh. Well, he's not a big Armagh man, he's a down man, but he married into Armagh and now he's become an orange and white brigade. But it's funny, but him and the wee lad were standing there yesterday and I was chatting to him and I said, do you remember the year we used to go to the Leinster final every year? And we went to the Leinster final for some mad reason. It was a lad's day out. It used to be the second Sunday in July, and me and him would go up on the train and we'd have a few beers. But I used to love standing in the canal end, which we were actually in the premium. I used to sit in the canal end and watch from behind the goals at the movement of the forward line. But I used to get in, Ryan, to watch the warm-ups because I was only early in my coaching journey. I wanted to see, could I pick anything up?
Yeah. And
all these warm-ups were so fancy, all these drills. You pick more drills up in a warm-up than you do anywhere. Right? Yeah. But then, Ryan, what you say, Bernard Jackman got me involved with the Dragons and the match day against Ulster. And the Dragons were playing Ulster. So I was walking out, holding the water, carrying the water, Rory Best walking out beside me. The match was at 8 o'clock, lads. The warm-up started at 7:30, right? Both teams were out at 7:30, 25 to 8. They did about 15, 20 minutes on the field, as you say, Ryan. Activation, quick skills, quick hands. They went back into the change rooms at 10 to 8. They were back out at 5 to 8. And it was like 2 minutes. It was the ball was kicked, and that was it. It was kickoff. You know, there was no extended 35, 40 minutes. And I honestly think, lads, out of all the sports in the world, boy, we over exaggerate warm-ups, something shocking. Like, I don't know what your views are like, but I think it's mad. Like, we're out, we do 30 minutes, we're back in, we come back out, we do another 20. It's nearly a fucking hour. You know, it's mad.
Yeah. Then we're wondering why players are cramping at the end of games.
I don't know, lads. What do you think?
But when you have a backroom team, right? This probably is a conversation.
Everyone wants to value their worth.
Everyone wants a pound of flesh. Like, and listen, I know there's probably lots of S&C fellas that are here, but sometimes less is more. Like, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. Everyone wants to have their 10, 15 minutes of this is my drill, this is my time. But ultimately, you have to remember what you're doing. You're not running a training session where you're just getting that ready to play. Like, and that has to be remembered in all of this. But I think there definitely is because you have, like we saw yesterday, Armagh have a massive backroom team, and each one of the backroom team had a part to play in the warmth in some capacity. And that's all well and good, absolutely, whatever you're into. But that's a lot of organising, and I'm just thinking of that from the amount of time you have pre-game. How much time is wasted explaining drills, moving, getting bibs, picking up cones, going to something different? Like, ultimately, it should just be flowing fairly rapid. Now, look, a pro setup like rugby, the lads are doing it literally every day of the week, so it's like clockwork. But it's a funny one. I think there's definitely an overemphasis on it in the GS, I think.
But lads, the players will have spent maybe another 20 minutes themselves, even in the changing rooms, before they even come out.
Yeah.
And the other point is, whenever you're training on a Tuesday and a Thursday or whatever it may be, your warm-up a lot of the time is half of what it is on match day.
Yeah.
So why all of a sudden on match day does it have to be, completely different to what you're doing in training?
Yeah. Very true. Very true. You know, well, going on to the game, Daniel, I suppose the big takeaway me and you both had obviously was that, well, one thing first and foremost, there's nowhere to get a good pint in Armagh.
And we tried.
Yeah, but that was a big takeaway. No, to be fair, the Pierce Oaks Club's a lovely spot, but on a serious note, the game itself, the two goalkeepers. So this whole thing ran before the game. McGuinness's press, but it's not really McGuinness's press. Donegal have always pressed to kick out. So first half they went after playing Hughes. I was very impressed with playing Hughes, Daniel, the first half. I thought he picked holes in the Donegal press. His short kickouts, particularly the tip of the D, were brilliant. But in the second half, Daniel, I thought Sean Patton was outstanding. Me and you commented a couple of times about the sort of the one-step kickout, and that was the big takeaway for me. I said to Kevin that day in school, the ability of both goalkeepers to pick holes in the press, and that's a fascinating aspect, Daniel, of the modern game. It really is.
Yeah. Well, it was probably the most interesting part of yesterday, calling a spade, because as we said, kind of on the pod last week, both teams were going to mirror each other, so it was cagey a lot of the time. I thought Blaine was excellent in the first half. Now, there was a significant wind going down one half of the field, and Armagh filled the D really well. They put 5-6 players in around the D, and Donegal couldn't split it. I thought Donegal were actually a little bit passive in their press. Like, we were talking about Dublin being active in their zones. Donegal weren't really; they were a bit static. I thought Blaine Hughes was excellent. I'd say he was close to 100% in the first half. I think he went long with maybe one, maybe two. But equally, then on the other side, I thought Patton was just on a different planet. There were sometimes I was thinking, Armagh had a good press. There was nowhere for him to put it, and he was just picking out chest. Kickouts you probably aren't even seeing in real time that are on, and he's able to quarterback. He's able to see it play almost ahead of it.
When you're watching, Ryan, did you watch the game? Or
no, I was actually down in Carlow.
Okay. Yes, sorry, I'll chat. I'll come to that in a wee second. But if you watch the game, like it is, Daniel, what you say, you can't really do justice for the kickouts when you're at it. It's just a different. Even Armagh's kickouts, Daniel, in the second half, they were struggling a wee bit, and then they pulled the two boys, pulled Mackin right at the sideline. They pulled, I think it was Aaron McKay right at the other sideline, to try and sort of stretch it a wee bit to give them wee pockets. So that they were looking for pockets for Blaine to pick in the second half, and they probably couldn't really get them because Donegal went ultra aggressive with the wind.
I thought that was probably what got Donegal back into the game a little bit after, especially obviously the goal was a bit of a hammer blow because to be honest, I thought it was a bit lucky. He was poor defending probably. It was a bit of a lump in from Mackin for 70 yards and that kind of kept Armagh in it. But I thought Donegal's press was actually what really got them moving. Donegal were fairly big around the middle and probably bigger than Armagh, and I think that's what got them on the front foot. But But the notable difference in the second half from Donegal was how active that press was. First half, it was static. Second half, there was communication. There was lateral movement. They were going hard after that. And even on break ball, like they were in their zones. But the second they realised, right, if everyone on the right-hand side realised, right, ball's gone left, everyone shifted to the left. And like we saw this an awful lot yesterday as well, where all the play was in one half of the pitch, as in one side of the pitch. And they were freeing up. There were so many times that Donegal got a couple of switches that Armagh had defended between the middle of the goal and the sideline. And it never occurred, but that a lot of that was coming from Donegal's pressing the kick on. Armagh just couldn't get out and had to defend very narrow at times. But look, the game itself was definitely cagey. Some of the simple skills, like I think the athletic grounds does lend itself to more contact. It is very hard to find spaces, like it really is. But I thought kickouts from both keepers were probably my pick of the day.
Yeah, small wee thing, Ryan, and it sounds a bit pedantic, like, but Jordy Burns came on and Stephen Campbell came on. The first couple of contributions was a sort of a fumbly hand pass, Daniel. I don't know if you remember that, or a wee spill or a wee turnover. We're talking about warm-ups. Like, players aren't allowed to handle the ball in the warm-up, right? In a game where predominantly, and I said this to you yesterday, lads, in a game where predominantly, Ryan, 90% of our game is played with the hands and the ball. Why are players not allowed on the sideline even to do a wee quick hand passing drill or even a wee quick 1-2? You know, players not allowed to actually have an impact in the warm up with a ball in their hands when they're coming on. Like, you could be sitting for 50 minutes, not having a ball in your hands, and then bang, you're in to a heat of a championship game, because that was sort of championship intensity ledge at times yesterday too. Like, you know, and there's a lot to be said for that. Like, surely.
Probably to be fair on the players, like, again, to relate back to rugby, players are always behind the goals and they're popping the ball, between each other, and they're ready to go. And as you said in Gaelic there, you might be brought on with 20 minutes to go. Fair enough, you might get doing a bit of a kickabout at half time, but sometimes you're not allowed out in the pitch.
Yeah.
So a lot of them guys maybe haven't touched the ball since the warm up for the start of the game. It's something. Look, I don't know. I do feel now, myself as a player, of course, you want to get a feel of the ball before you're being brought on to a big game like that. Stephen Campbell he's a very skillful player. What you said, the first possession he had, he kind of give a watery fist pass.
And Charlie Burns the same. A couple of wee fumbly passes. I think that definitely has to be the fact that for 50 minutes they haven't touched the ball. But go back to the game tactically, Ryan. Interestingly, myself and Daniel straight away within about 3 minutes time we said sort of like, we're looking at Donegal, what's Jim going to bring differently? Like, but within 3 minutes they had 15 men behind the ball. Within 3 minutes, like, they had 15 men behind the ball, and they're obviously rotating their sweeper. It was Hugh McFadden for a while, it was Ryan McHugh for a while, Daniel, it was Peter Mogan. They had a flexibility in how they were defending, and it was interesting. Armagh were very similar, Daniel, in that Kieran Mackin was marking McBurdy man to man and did a fantastic job of McBurdy when he seemed to be out the field. But yet when McBurdy went inside Ryan, Aaron McKay picked him up. And one thing that me and him had talked about, Ryan, it's interesting, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Like, the level of comms at inter-county level now, communication between players, like Aidan Falker was outstanding with communication. There was a lovely moment where Steve McMenamin got the ball right underneath us, and Falker was just shouting, "Let him have it, let him have it." And I know that's the old club, the cornerback, let him have it, but like, it's right. Like, what McBurdy on the ball in that area, like, let him have it, like, and it was just wee small things, but the level of communication ran now through the roof at inter-county level, through the roof.
It is, and I suppose that's where they're now smart. Where Kieran Mackin to me is probably more of a halfback. So when McBurdy was playing out the pitch, Kieran Mackin was probably very comfortable picking him up there. So naturally enough, McBurdy was cute enough to pull Mackin into the full forward line, where he's probably not as comfortable. That was the other thing I noticed about Dublin. Dublin don't really lose their shape when they're man marking. So, for instance, Johnny Small will pick up Paddy Clifford, but if Paddy Clifford maybe moves way back deep into his own defence, John Small then would just let somebody else tag him, like a Scully or something. You see other teams where they just say man mark him to death no matter where he goes. So look, communication is very important as well, and I suppose having the trust in your teammates that he'll be able to deal with them for that play until you might need to switch over again.
Edge.
The man marking idea is interesting, because I don't know if you saw Derek Hanneman's goal at the weekend, and Stephen Poacher. It was a real opportunity for like a double up for leaving your man, going to the danger, defend the danger. That's the most logical thing any defender we thought, to defend the danger, defend a goal. And it was my man. I have my man, even if he's running to the sideline and getting me out of the way on purpose. But I have my man is not scoring. I don't think you can operate like that at this level. Like, I mean, it's and that does require a huge level of communication, as you alluded to, Stevie. Like, I mean, it's a rotating sweeper. I know myself, it's very, very hard to do that, because a sweeper a lot of the time is a kind of a unique position. Like, you have to be able to read situations and read danger an awful lot of the time. So, like, for both Armagh and Donegal to be comfortable with 4 or 5 different players doing it, I thought was very interesting, but it required constant talk. Like, the only thing with Donegal is, like, McBrearty was back inside his own 45 3 or 4 times. Teams are so good now at exposing players like McBrearty. He's a fantastic footballer, but God knows he's not a right wing back. You imagine Derry isolating him; they'll flood everyone inside that half of the field. He'll just get picked off. So like, I'm not sure 15 back is ideal for Donegal's style of play. But it's interesting. But as I said, more things changed, more than the same.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say, Dan, and I get you about McBrearty sprinting back, is probably not where you want him to be. But for someone like him, it's probably being man-marked by one player really closely. I find then by him tackling back actually potentially gets him free from the player that's tagging him, you know. And then if Donegal happen to turn that ball over, more often than not, it'll be the closest player to McBrearty that will just tag him until the play finishes, you know. So Dara Canavan's another boy that's very good at that, where he'll come drifting out the pitch, turn the ball over. All of a sudden, then the guy that's maybe supposed to be man marking Dara Canavan is nowhere near him because he's tried to join the attack. And then Canavan will just maybe burn a mismatch of a midfielder or a halfback or something.
Good point.
It's actually, lads, it's much more harder, lads. We've talked about this. It's much more harder to pick up or tag someone from deeper than it is when they're inside. You know, and I remember Ryan, like, for example, even with Carlo, we're going to chat about Carlo now. Ryan, you were at the game at the weekend, big game in Division 4. Like, when we were playing, lads, like, obviously Foley and Broderick were key forwards for us. I don't know if you remember the Tyrone game, for example. We lined him out at left half back. You know, just initially, just to sort of give them something different to think about. So we knew he was going to be tagged, Ryan, but what we're saying is just hover around left half back, first 15, 20 minutes, be deep. You know, it's much harder to pick a player up like that. You know, when it's back to goal, you've got a hound of him and you've got fucking 2 or 3 men around him, you know, and it's just interesting, like, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. It throws the opposition off as well.
Yeah, 100%. But Ryan, going on to obviously Armagh Donegal. I suppose tonight we've chatted tactically about 2 games in particular. We've chatted about the Dublin Kerry game. We've chatted about Armagh Donegal. You know, it's still early in the year, still a bit of shadow boxing. You were obviously in Netwatch on Sunday for Carlow and Leitrim, and I think this is brilliant because, you know, we're watching the Sunday game, you're watching other shows, and you're looking at the big couple of games, but to actually analyze a Division 4 game is probably obscure for a lot of people. So from your perspective, you obviously have chatted to you today about this. You were very impressed, obviously, with the pace of Carlow. Would it be right in saying that?
Yeah, for me, it was a very even game in my opinion. First half, Carlow probably shaded it. In fairness, they were ahead at half time, which reflected that. Second half, I felt that Leitrim came with a lot more energy, and the game became more frantic, which in one way it brought Leitrim to life and it brought them into it. The likes of Ryan O'Rourke was able to find more space. Barry McNulty for Leitrim kicked 3 or 4 points as well. But for me, the half back line of Carlow was very impressive. Bambrick at wing half back. I'll be honest, I hadn't seen him play before, but they were very smart about the way they set it up. They seemed to always get him on a mismatch with regards to pace. Got the kick out away short, and he could just burn whoever faced him. He could just burn them on the outside. And Carlow, within a few seconds, were transitioning from a short kick out to straight up into the half forward line, where the likes of Hulton, Foley, Dunphy, and these boys then, the shooters were coming off him. Another guy that impressed me for Carlow was Clark. Is it Jimmy Clark? He was actually wearing number 7.
Yeah.
He was wearing number 7, left-footed, if I'm correctly on that. Yeah. But he seemed to play a lot of the time further up the pitch. He was definitely very, very influential throughout the whole game. Morrissey is obviously, you know, a big figure for Carlow in the middle of the pitch. He was tagged very closely. Leitrim actually just put a man on him to follow him everywhere. And then obviously Foley up front, like he's still a finisher. Once you get the ball into his hands, left or right foot, he backed himself. So I felt Carlow were big, they were physical, and the pace coming out of defence was the big thing for me, especially Bambrick at wing half back. I thought he was excellent throughout. Carlow they probably learnt from where Wexford played Leitrim the week before, in that Carlow dropped off more or less every single Leitrim kick out. So they let them have it, and that there enabled them always to have a +1 in front of Ryan O'Rourke and Dara Rooney. And, you know, them two guys for Leitrim have been causing havoc throughout the league. So Carlow were probably always well set up in the first half. The second half, it did become a bit more frantic, and like Ryan O'Rourke scored a clinker of a goal. But the last play, it came from that right wing again where Bambrick was set up. It was a long kick out. Carlow actually won it, and they just transitioned down the right-hand side, and your guy, Colm Hulton, unbelievable finish. Like, he stepped in. Again, we talked about players backing themselves. Like, he's right-footed, if I'm right on that. Backed himself, stepped inside, and there was loads of bodies, and he could only put it in one place, and he stuck it in the stanchion.
Hulton came into the panel in May last year, and I'll tell you a good story about him. I don't mind sharing this, but he came in with a real sort of cocky Dublin sort of attitude about him. You know, like, Colin's a nice lad. Like, you know, I'm not getting at him here, but it was funny. One night, Ryan, he had told me he was sort of the top scorer, and I think it was what club was he, Ledge?
Ballymon Kickers.
Ballymon, he's the second top scorer in Ballymon behind Dean Rock. I said, oh, brilliant, great lad, fair play to you, you know. And he had that sort of swagger about him. So he was standing so he was eligible to play for Dublin, and we're in the training ground in Carlow, and he was standing one night, the Carlow tracksuit top on him, and he wasn't training, he was injured. And he says to me, I never thought I'd be wearing one of these. And I says, well, you'll not be wearing a fucking Dublin one anyway. But but I just brought him back down to a wee level, you know. No, listen, a talented player. There's no doubt about it at all. And a finisher, you know. But Ledge, I suppose we've sort of looked at, we were at the Carlow game last year against Antrim. They're very young, very naive, you know, probably a bit too honest, you know, at times, even the way they play. But certainly what Ryan's saying there, they've obviously sort of decided, look, you know, to win these games, we're going to have to be smart and defend properly.
Yeah, it was. I was talking to Dara Foley after the Laois game, and obviously, you know, trying to get things back up and running. And I won't give away any trade secrets or anything, but obviously, Carlow have been struggling a bit on their own kick out, and I'd be curious. Obviously, didn't see any of it, Ryan. But what way did Leitrim go really hard after the Carlow kick out, or what was the rest like?
Leitrim did. Fury was in goals, and in fairness to him, in the first half, he was excellent at getting it away short, because Leitrim probably there was a slight breeze, and I felt Leitrim had it in the first half. They were putting a real good squeeze on, as in they were pushing, committing a lot of bodies forward, but Fury wasn't afraid on the one step, get it off to a corner back. And probably then Carlow impressed me with how they could control the ball coming out in the first half. Took the sting out of it. And then in the second half, once the game opened up a bit, Fury again got it away short to the likes of Bambrick. Carlow were very good at coming in narrow and then bunching in and breaking out. And Bambrick nearly was always on a mismatch. Like, his pace was lightning. Carlow attacked.
What club's Mickey, Daniel?
He's from O'Loughlin. He's a fantastic footballer. Like, he's a really good
man. Ryan, there was a video floated about last year. I don't know if you remember. There was a goal he scored, Ledge. Do you remember that against Longford? Ryan, he took the ball in the halfway line and literally just weaved his way through, you know, a slalom of players and just buried it. Like, you know, brilliant footballer. You were very impressed, Ryan.
Yeah, I was. And to be honest, in the second half, majority of Carlow scores came down the right-hand side. I don't know whether that's maybe their stronger side just for attacking, or maybe they felt there was a weakness on Leitrim's left side, but majority of their scores came down the right-hand side, and they were actually very good at getting in and getting fisted scores, you know. So look, the game was Leitrim felt they had it won. In fairness, Leitrim scored 112 in the second half. They were a much different team in that second half, and probably felt that they had done enough, apart from that just moment of brilliance from Hulton. The one thing I would say is Carlow, you were talking about them being young last year when you just went and watched them. As soon as they got ahead, they done everything. Now, I suppose from a Leitrim point of view, you'd say, you know, it's not fair play or whatever you want to call it, but they done everything to make sure that Leitrim got no momentum back up the pitch. They fouled it. They rugby tackled if they had to. They slowed it down. They got bodies behind the ball, and they just dogged it out.
That's the ghost of Poacher, Ryan, is still alive.
Here, 6 years. I was going to say 6 years. 6 years. They can't be blaming the Nordies in that one, for fuck's sake. Jesus Christ. Here, but lads, on a serious note, like there's nearly an hour already. Like, with brilliant discussion tonight, even on 3 games, you know. But I think, you know, chatting to Kieran earlier, obviously, you know, our coaches in the forum, they love to hear sort of, you know, the analytical stuff, the coaching thing, and particularly being at games, Ryan, yourself being at those 2 games, great insight, Daniel, myself, and yourself at the Armagh game. I think you see a lot more games. And I suppose from a coaching perspective, Ryan, like, you know, if you're going to a game, is there any sort of things that you would particularly look out for as a coach, like with a coaching eye, analytical eye? Is there anything in particular that you'd be looking at as a coach, like just for our coaches in the forum?
Yeah, well, you are, I suppose, as I mentioned there, even just going back to that Carlo game, like Carlo dropped off every single kick out of Leitrim's. And sometimes we get obsessed with stats. You know, you could maybe go in at half time and say Leitrim's got 100% on their own kick outs. But for me, that meant that the likes of Ryan O'Rourke and Dara Rooney weren't really influential in that first half period for Leitrim because they had to work the ball the length of the pitch. Carlo were always set up. So there's probably a lot to be said for, even though you mightn't win every single kick out, but kick it long and all the time. Even if the opposition are saying, giving you the ball to the cornerback, you know, don't take the simple option. Let's go long and see if we can bypass 4 or 5 of the Carlo attackers and get the ball in early to the likes of them sharpshooters in Ryan O'Rourke and Dara Rooney. Sometimes I feel the game now, it's a wee bit too obsessed with stats, and a lot of coaches are looking at, what was our kick out percentage? You know, what was our, like Dublin, we talked about them boys backing themselves with their shots. Sometimes it's like working the perfect score instead of just giving a player the license to back himself and go for it. That was the one thing. Also, I suppose tactically, we talked about the Dublin press. A lot of teams, you know, say they're going to do it, but they don't actually back themselves, and they probably haven't done enough work on the training ground to have faith. The players don't believe in it enough, or they're afraid of what's going to happen if it goes wrong.
Yeah, that's interesting, Ryan. Ledge, I think you'd sort of looking for.
Well, we've talked. I always love watching the kick-out press to see what's happening.
Yeah,
we've talked an awful lot about it. But just the other thing, and it was kind of something from yesterday, when a team gets a turnover, when a team is breaking down the field, how quick are they to set up inside? How quick are they to get numbers high up the field? And I thought Donegal was really interesting yesterday. They had 2 players consistently with paint on their boots, either side, either flank. Donegal got into width so quickly. Armagh were more so getting a pod of 3, a little nugget up into the 21 as quickly as they could. It's just really interesting to see. Like we think sometimes there's a thought that maybe turnover ball, anything can happen, and forward play might be a bit aloof. But there was a very clear structure every time there's an attack. There was a forward structure, and I think that's probably the biggest evolution in the last couple of years is that teams were, let's say, originally defending with huge structure, but now you're starting to see more structured attack. It mightn't be the thing the traditionalists want to hear, but ultimately, when you see how many numbers are behind balls so regularly, you have to have a structured attack. And like obviously Derry are fantastic at it, but really interesting to see Donegal keeping significant width. And if they were a bit sharper on switches yesterday, they could have had a couple more scores.
Yeah.
You see, Dan, just coming in on that one. Sorry, like a lot of the time we're talking about players getting back and teams are getting everybody behind the ball. But sometimes then when you turn the ball over, are you actually thinking about what you're going to do when you're attacking? Like Tyrone, I think in the second half, I missed that game because it was in Croker, but did they position McCurry more or less as like a number 11? So that if they did turn the ball over, their transition was they had an option to kick. Like if you're bringing everyone behind the ball, you've only really got one option when you turn the team over, and that's run hard. You know, and you gotta back yourself that you've got more powerful runners than the opposition have of tracking you. While if you leave 1 or 2 players up, at least one on the 40, and then maybe one inside, you have the 2 options. You can transition with a kick pass if it's on, or you can run it hard. So was Donegal? Did they always leave 2 up? Is that what you were saying, or did they get everybody back the whole time?
Well, I think because of the athletic grounds, the nature of it, Ryan. I think Armagh's scramble defence was pretty effectively. It's like a couple of times, even with Sean Patton got a quick kick out away, Armagh were very good at scrambling, and the space for Ryan probably wasn't there to kick the ball. But what I'd be interested in saying, and this is what I was actually thinking today before I came on the show, I'd actually like to see Donegal Daniel playing Croke Park, because I'd like to see Sean Patton's ability to pick holes in a press in Croke Park, and then Donegal's nature to kick the ball. I didn't think Donegal kicked the ball as much as Armagh yesterday, Ryan, but I think that was largely down to the sort of dynamics, Daniel, of the field and how the game played. Would you not agree? Sort of.
Yeah, there was no real option to kick pass as such. Like, I mean, it was so congested, and any kick pass you were given was almost a 50-50 a lot of the time. I mean, before Armagh's goal, they put in maybe 5 kick passes inside the 45, of trying to penetrate. Every one of them were turned over. The goal was lucky, to be honest with you. It was just poor defending from McManaman. And I know, look, with putting ball in, you throw enough shit at the wall, eventually something's got to stick, so you might get 1 out of 5. But there was like Croke Park plays so differently, and it's a really good point from that Ryan was making. Like, I think in Croke Park you have to have the ability to kick as well as transition through the hands, and I think
100%.
that's why Dublin and Kerry are so good, and I think that's why teams that play purely on the counter will struggle in Croke Park. And it's my worry for Derry. Like, Derry naturally they run hard through the hands. That is kind of their game. I think that double pivot, that 11 and the 14, that at least the option for a kick pass or a second kick pass is there. And McCurry and Canavan in the second half, I saw it the second half, they were top class, where it was one kick pass, second kick pass, and then you had 4 or 5 transition runners coming hard off Canavan. It was really nice to watch.
The one thing that's exactly, I was going to say, Derry, maybe that's why they have struggled in Croke Park, because their game plan is based around, let's say, turning a team over on hard counter-attack and running the ball through the hands. Like Shane McGuigan is back often as much as any other player. The one thing I noticed about Kerry was they always left Sean O'Shea and David Clifford up top. You know, that's probably something they're going to maybe change this year. Sean O'Shea sometimes can, just be brought back and playing like deeper. He was always up top alongside Clifford. The other thing about Kerry footballers, if you just watch them, every time they get the ball, no matter where they are, they always look forward. It's obviously something in the training ground, like they must run conditioned games where if you're not looking up, the opposition gets the ball, So no matter where they are, they're not looking sideways. If they turn a team over, they're not looking for a fist pass sideways. They look up first. If it's not on, then they'll build it accordingly.
Yeah. No, listen, it's fascinating. And just to finish, lads, I suppose you've seen Division 1 game, Ryan, on Saturday night. Lads, we've seen a Division 2 game, top of Division 2 Sunday. Ryan, you were Division 4 on Sunday as well. Seen a bit of Down on Saturday as well, Division 3. Like, the game for me is it is a very healthy state. I think there's a fascination around so many aspects of the game, and I think McGeaney said it last week after the Kildare game. We're a wild sport for like doom and gloom and change, and we need to do this and we need to do that, and let sort of the sport evolve. And actually, I do feel, Ryan, I suppose we'll finish in this. We'll give you the closing word. The game is starting to evolve naturally into a better spectacle. Would you agree?
Definitely. Like, I think teams realise now, Stephen, that playing ultra defensive and trying to keep the opposition to 9 or 10 points and maybe you scoring 1-8, 1-9, it's not going to happen. It might win a game here and there, but realistically, you're not going to probably get out of a league campaign playing that way, and you're not going to win a provincial title playing that way. Like, Fermanagh kicked 16 points there at the weekend against Cork. And that's unheard of for Fermanagh, if I'm being honest. It's a long time since they've kicked that amount. And you'll still have, naturally enough, people complaining that, we didn't do this, or we conceded too much. We conceded too much the other way. You know what I'm saying? So I think the game's in a great position, and no matter what you do, obviously Jarlath Burns is going to look at a few things, but no matter what you do, you're always going to have people that aren't happy. There was 12,000 at the athletic grounds, you said yesterday. There was a massive crowd at the Dublin Kerry game on Saturday night. There was a massive Leitrim support down in Carlow at the weekend. So people are still enjoying the game, in my opinion.
Yeah. Ledge?
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful taking opinions from Tom57 on Twitter. Like, do you know what I mean? You kind of have to just look at, as Ryan said, people will vote with their feet. And the national leagues, like we landed in, 2 hours before the game?
2.5 hours before throw-in.
There's a queue. There's a queue a mile long. So ultimately, I don't think there's any issues. And like, if you want to poke holes in any sport, and look hard enough, you'll find it. If you want to find a bit of good in it, you'll find it as well. And look, I wouldn't be thinking that there's any drastic changes necessary. I think it's, as you say, it's naturally evolving. If Dublin and Kerry's end to go by on Saturday evening, we're in for a decent summer,
Yeah, lads, thanks very much. Brilliant insight, and we'll hopefully catch you again next week, lads. Ryan, thank you. Daniel, thanks again, lads.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers, boys. Take it easy.
Right.